bids are in, the gavel has dropped. Ladies and gentlemen, here at WineBid, we are finally hammered. Yes, that's right. This is the WineBid podcast about all things wine auction, wine retail, wine value. I, as always, am Jeff McGurn here on our WineBid marketing team. And with me, of course, is Paul Walker, our wine auction, wine expert, I should say, although he is quite modest, but this man knows more about wine, has forgotten more about wine than I will ever know. Anyway, we're going to jump right. Yeah, we've got a lot going on today. We're going to jump right into some of the stuff that has just entered auction. In this particular podcast, we're going to focus on France. We're going to focus on the United States, but let's jump right into Bordeaux. There are a few wines that I wanted to sort of point out that we saw come into auction this week. We've got an 89 Haut-Brion, which that one is really interesting to me. We've got two of those. There are already 8 people tracking this. Obviously, this is a marquee year, 1989 Haut-Brion. It's a fantastic bottle. Our starting price is $16.65, which is interesting to me because as early as January of 2022, we saw this same bottle hammering at $2,000. I mean, I guess my question is, we keep talking about this week after week. Are we seeing a little bit of softening? Because this is a rare bottle. Right. It is a pretty amazing vintage. To see it come down this much, I mean, we're getting to 30%, or not 30%, maybe 20% decline year over year, because we're in January, we're 1 January away. I just kind of wanted to get your thoughts on this, Paul.
I mean, I think it's been dropping a little bit. It's funny because we talked about the 1990, which I said was like, I think it was it almost half? I can't even remember now. I mean, it was up there, but it was almost half the price. And I was saying how like, it's, not considered as great worldwide and all this kind of stuff. And the price is a lot better. It's like a better value, for a potentially not quite as good, but maybe as good down the road wine. And so that wine, I think the 90 will sort of start to continue to creep up in value.
And the 89 is going to...
I don't think it's going to drop, but it might just sort of steadily increase, and I think the 90 will probably catch up to it eventually. So I don't think it's going to drop that much, but it still was a little bit, I think, overinflated, and now it'll most likely sell where it is right now and somewhere in that range. It's funny you mentioned the 89, because I tagged the 09 and the 15 because those are both in two. And if you think about it, if you talk about value, the 09 is a double 100-pointer from Parker and Suckling, if that means anything. And it's 790 reserve, and the 15 is an Advocate 100-pointer, and it's a 540 reserve. So, I think in reference to the 89 and 90, you're looking at better values with these younger wines. I'm not saying they're going to be as great, because 89 Haut-Brion it's one of these kind of best wines ever produced in the world, in the history of wine. Who knows if it'll ever reach that potential, but still, I don't think it's going to drop that much.
Well, look, $16.65 doesn't seem like an exorbitant price to pay for one of the best wines in the world ever produced, right?
That's true.
All things considered. Let's get into one that I thought was super interesting. I don't know that this is a particularly amazing year, but 67 costs mag for 230. I thought, maybe a little bit of an off year, $230 for a mag of costs from 1967. Not a lot to pay. And I thought that could be a super interesting wine.
No, I think that's just not a great vintage.
It's not a great vintage. There's an 82 for 330.
Yeah, so I flagged the 82 and the 2000 because I said, hey, these are, 82's a fantastic wine, and this bottle looks really, really, really great shape. So the 67, I mean, that's probably one of those things where it would be very difficult to find a replacement of 67 costs in a mag. So if you need this bottle, now's the time to get it. And it's not too expensive, but I would hesitate to be too excited about it, especially if you were going to serve it with the 82 or the 2000. I would avoid doing that and blow it away.
Head to head, what's going to win wine of the night? So moving on, 2016 Montrose. I thought this one was really interesting because $170. This Montrose, 2016, by the 2016 Bordeaux I've had, I think have been really good. And this one's been getting great reviews recently. So I thought this one was a particularly interesting value. And $170 just doesn't seem to me for Montrose to be all that crazy with a few years on it from a good vintage.
No, that's great. I thought that's great. That wine is consistently amazing. They've had some obviously particularly great vintages that are very expensive. But there's also a bottle of 66 in this week for $335, which seems like a lot to me. That's another challenge. I don't think it's as bad as 67, but it's not great. And I don't think there's too many examples of 66 Bordeaux out there that are really phenomenal. I'm sure there are exceptions, maybe Oberon or something, but that's a lot. $335 you're paying, I think, for the vintage, whereas the 16 at 170, you're right. I think it's a deal. That's not too expensive. There is also a bottle of the second label of Cost in the 2005 Pagode de Cost, which is $45 reserve. So from a great vintage, 18 years old now, that's a nice sort of entry level price to get into the second label from a great vintage. So
I like where you're going here. Let's talk about a couple of sub $100 values that I think we've got in Bordeaux. There's a 2012 Pape Clement for $85. We've got 5 of those. From my perspective, I like Pape Clement. I think this is a solid bottle. It's not a 2013. It's not a 2016 or 2019, but it's got 11 years of age. I think $85 is a really good price for Pape Clement from 2012 with 11 years of age. Likewise, there's a 2015 Canon La
13 years of age, right? You said 2012?
2012 would be 11 years of age.
No, it's 2023 now. That's
2023 minus 20.
Oh, yeah. Never mind.
I mispronounced stuff.
I can't do math, obviously.
I'll handle the math here. Okay, sir.
I work for an auction, but I can't, do math or even basic math or remember numbers whatsoever. So there we go.
Then 2015 Canon La Gaffier. This one already has a bid on it. 21 trackers. We got 4 of these. $85. I think this is also a great price for an amazing bottle. But you've got 2 great producers, good years for those bottles at least. Sub $100. $85 I think is solid for those.
No, absolutely. That's a great deal. And I think, 15 Canon La Gaffier got a lot of hype. It was a number 2 spectator wine. So it probably can't. I would bet this had come down in price from when it was released, or I should say when the rating was given, because that would inevitably push it up over $100, especially because it's got great scores otherwise. And in vintages, what is it, the 2009 or one of these, earlier vintages got double hundreds or something, and the price was quite a bit higher. So I think that's a super deal at 85.
That's a steal. And then, also sub 100, there's a Chateau, an 88 Chateau Clemens for $90. And I thought that one was really cool because I've had Clemens from the 80s. They're phenomenal. Like, they're so good. This one in particular has great tasting notes and people are raving about it. 35 is still a good birth year gift for somebody, who's turning 35, like I am this year. So
that reminds me, there's an 81 de Chem this week. Did you see that?
I saw the 81 de Chem. I may be bidding on the 81 de Chem. That one is, again, I didn't even mention it because I might bid on it, but what is it? I think if I recall correctly, it was like $350. Look,
that's kind of going
price for the Chem on release.
Right. That's just kind of going rate. If you just kind of look at, all the de Chem that's ever in the auction at any given time, it's always somewhere around 300. There's still half bottles of the 89, and those are at 280. I mean, that's the 89, 90, and 88's never been ever inexpensive. But
I would upgrade to
the 01 is obviously, it's over 300 for a half bottle for that matter. But
yeah, I
think 81 for 365. Did it get a bid already? Maybe you're locked out. No, 365, no bids yet. So go after that. 365,
no bids. I still think 365. I mean, so look, that's about what it's going to go for on release. And that one has 30 years of age on it. It's 30 years old now. So I think that's just a phenomenal deal. And then I love that you're terrible at math. Then we've got Chateau Bastor La Montagne, another Sauternes, 83, which would for $45. I haven't been able to find any tasting notes on that, but still $45. It's probably still going to be kicking right now, even at 40 years.
Awesome vintage for a Sauternes. So I don't know this producer. I know the name. That's all I know about it. I've never tasted it, but 45 for an 83 is cheap. And that bottle is in great shape. The color looks fantastic. That's awesome.
Any that you want to mention? We got to go quickly, though. We only have a limited amount of time today. So if you're going to mention anything, you got to go fast.
I'm in a real hurry this week. Yeah, let me just go back really quickly to...
I'll let you mention 3, and then the rest you have to put in the show notes.
Okay. I will.
Quick, like bunnies, Paul. Quick. Come on. Like bunnies.
Yeah, no, for some reason, I was sorting by cost because you were looking at under $100 Bordeaux earlier. And I finally remembered the one wine from Bordeaux that I was trying to remember. We like to talk about the more expensive white wine club in Bordeaux.
Yes, I saw one.
So
yes.
This week, that very wine I always like to talk about it's La Ville Haut-Brion Blanc. And I never remember the name of it because the red wine from La Ville Haut-Brion, I don't think is extremely well known, but the white wine is always very sought after. And there's a single bottle, there are 6 bottles of the 1994 at $325. So that was kind of exciting to see because this doesn't come up that often. And I'm sure it will get some bids. And it seems very, very expensive, especially when it's one of these wines that transcends ratings, right? It doesn't get great ratings necessarily. 94 wasn't, as far as I know, that great of a white Bordeaux vintage. So that to me stood out for sure. 89 Lynch Bage, we've talked about this, legendary wine. And so that was one that I had to bring up just because we talk about it a lot. There's 5 bottles.
Yep.
I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that there is a full case of your
Grand LaRose
1981 Grand LaRose.
There is, which I have had this bottle. It is actually quite good, at least for my taste. Even at 30 years old, it's an amazing, I still think it's a great bottle of wine, especially for the price for a second growth Bordeaux. I'm going to drag you kicking and screaming to Burgundy right now. Normally we get a lot of Bordeaux. This week really was a Burgundy week as far as I'm concerned. There was a lot of great Burgundy that came into auction. 1996, Louis Jadot, Domaine, Ganges, Nuit Saint-Georges, Les Bordeaux. This one, 8 trackers, 1 bottle, $110 for a Premier Cru Côte de Nuit. That just seems like a good value to me.
It's an excellent red vintage. And I mean, I don't know. I think for Nuit Saint-Georges Bordeaux, there's some other producers that get more attention and the quality is probably a little higher, but that's still
not. For $110?
Yeah.
I mean,
there were a couple other things this week in Burgundy land that struck me. I don't know if you saw it too, but one of my, again, sort of perennial favorites, Domaine Lafleur. I think there's multiple bottles of the Village Pouligny Montrachet from 1995.
I did $75 a bottle. We've got 5 of them.
And I was like, to see any Lafleur below $100, even for, really sort of like Bourgogne Blanc, for example, it's not at all expensive. So I did flag those.
By the way, there's also a 3-pack for $220 that already has bids on it of that 95 Lafleur.
Yeah.
Montrachet. Did you see the 05 Louis Jadot Volnay Claude de la Barre 3-liter in original case for $320? I thought that was really interesting. Large format, $320. I thought that was really interesting for Volnay.
That's a great party bottle right there. That's a fantastic sort of show off, Burgundy large format you don't see very often and not too expensive. I mean, again, Jadot gets that a bit of a stigma with the sort of negociant profile, but they do have some amazing parcels and some of the wines are incredible. I haven't tasted the Volnays I probably tasted this wine back near release, but I don't recall having it in any recently, let's just say. So I don't know. That's a fun bottle, not too much to pay for 3-liter of any kind of Burgundy for that matter. Did you see the Bizo wines that are in this week? Because those always kind of go a little bit too wild.
Go for it.
Bizo 02. Well, it's the same wine, 3 different lots of the same wine. It looks like 7 bottles of the 02 Von Romane Jachet for $2,900 a piece, which is wild because that's DRC territory or even beyond, depending on the vintage in the vineyard. And so those struck out. There's some large format Dujac, also a mag of 2000 Clos Saint Denis for $3,000. And there's an 05 Dujac Clos de la Roche 750 for $1,175. There's some also, speaking of 96 vintage, there's 96 Georges Meunier Chamelot Musigny Fusselat at $450, which that's a lot, but still, it's got a lot of time on it. Fantastic red vintage and great wine. The 18s and 19s are going for quite a bit more. So it's cool to see something from a great vintage of the 90s for under $500. Also a bottle of 05 Georges Roumier Chamelot Musigny, just the Village, for $465. Not a great value, but awesomely great and rare producer. Also, for a more let's say, newer on the scene, but still very sought after. There's Prairie Roque, Vin de France Blanc, which is kind of like a very sort of generic sounding label.
Wine of France White.
Yeah, from a not very generic producer. So that's always cool. I'm sure these will get, probably snatched up at 220. I would think that this price is based on, recent hammers for other vintages, similar vintages of this wine, because I have seen it before in auction. But anyway, there's 5 bottles of 17 at 220 currently. So that was, did you see the Magnum of Creole Bittard Montrachet from Fontaine Gagnard? That was
no, I did not.
Yeah, there's a mag of 04 at 650 reserve. That stuck out to me too, because I was like, oh, cool. That's a great vintage, great wine.
Well, I want to get your thoughts on a few things. 09 Bouchard Le Corton, 135. We've got 2 of those. You're talking about a Grand Cru Corton for 135.
09 Bouchard Corton. I didn't see that. Okay. Yeah. There you go.
That one to me, even at 09, seems like a tremendous value for a Grand Cru Corton, right? One I thought was really interesting because we actually saw a few of these come to auction. A 2011 Marquis d'Angeville, Volnay, Champagnes, Magnums for $330. Yeah, we had multiple Marquis d'Angeville Magnums come into auction. And that's a producer that I follow and I really like, Marquis d'Angeville.
You got the 2011 stigma there with those mags. And also there's, oddly enough, 04 mag, Clos de Duc, another difficult red vintage.
Yeah, they're difficult vintages, but it is a good producer. So I think, I don't know, I look at that and I think there's potentially some tremendous value there because against a difficult vintage, you might actually get some decent juice.
No, I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just saying
it's a challenging vintage.
It is. And, your pretentious Burgundy friends, when they see the 11, they'll be, oh, Jeff, thanks for bringing that. We're not going to open that tonight.
They're like, I wouldn't use that for mouthwash, right? There's an 05 Domaine Bruno Clavelier Von Romani Le Bon Mont Ville Vignier.
Actually destroy that one so badly. So
yay. This one, $200. This bottle has solid tasting notes and $200 just seems like a pretty decent value for me. Great price, especially when you compare it to like a lot of retailers. You talked about 11 Lucien Mont Chambertin Claude de Bay. This is a mag for $650. But again, okay, yes, 2011 is a challenging year in Burgundy, but it's $650 for a mag of Grand Cru from Côte de Nuit, right?
Yeah, no, it's funny. I just did an 11 search and there's quite a few lots from Burgundy in this week. One of my favorites, Sylvain Catillard, Bourgogne Rouge, 120. I'm not sure I would go for that. But now what you're talking about, the 11 Volnays from d'Angeville and the Lemoine, the Clos de Bez, $650, Clos de Bez is very expensive. So
it's a mag though.
That's pretty compelling. And if you look at the scores, if that means anything to you, they're not weak. They're not panning it. They're not saying this is a terrible wine. And even Allen Meadows is 93 to 96 from Allen Meadows. That's pretty serious territory. So you're right. $650 for that Lemoine Clos de Bez. That sounds great. It's wild. These must be from the same collection because multiple magnums of
Bergs.
Vineyards.
And
really cool.
Look, maybe I'm not looking close enough, but I feel like I don't see a lot of like d'Angeville and I don't see a lot of mags of Bergs coming along.
Large formats are hard to come by just on principle. So yeah.
01 Paul Pernod, Bittard Montrachet. This one, you're looking at Grand Cru Côte de Beaune. The 2022 notes say it's in great shape, right? $205 for a Grand Cru Côte de Beaune. Especially if the tasting notes are accurate and this thing is still kicking. I think that's also potentially tremendous value right there. If you want to compare it to other Grand Cru Côte de Beaune, I'm curious to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, no, what year did you say it was?
01.
2001. Yeah, I think there was a hail vintage, I believe. I think there was some real trouble with some of the wines from 01, but there are obviously some stars. And I think you're taking your chance on some of these things, but
for the price, my point is I think it's appropriately priced into there.
Yeah.
I guess I'm one of those people who, if I'm looking for value, I kind of like to go to off years with really good producers because I think you can get a very steep discount and you can still get something that's quite good. Right. Is it the best expression of a Grand Cru Côte de Beaune? Probably not. Right. No. But is it still going to be a very good expression? Will it be worth the money? I think it could very well be worth the $205 that you're going to pay for that.
I think you're right. And, just looking at this bottle too, I have to say that oftentimes the color on the site of especially these older white wines will generally look darker on the site than it is in person. I'm not trying to say that to, hype up the wines or anything, but I often go back in the warehouse and look at color of some of these older wines because they're not going to look exactly the same in current daylight as they would on the website. And this thing looks particularly clean and light color. So it looks like it's aged really, really well. So yeah, I'm with you on this for sure. I would definitely take a gamble at 205 for Batard for sure.
So speaking of great values on Grand Cru, Ligné Michelot Claude de la Roche, 2016. We have two of them at 225. Again, I think this is 225 is a solid price for a Grand Cru, even in an off year, right?
Yeah, for sure. That got some smoke and scores. Robinson 18 plus. And yeah, I think you're talking about a producer that's, shares a name with somebody much more famous, but it's not considered, top tier, but still Claude de la Roche, awesome vineyard, 225 or 16 red. That's a deal.
And then still technically Burgundy, there's a 2015 Jean Follard Morgan Cuvée Courcelette.
Yeah, I saw it's like follow up to our Foillard mention from last week.
Yes, $55. Great price for the bottle, great bottle. And I think that's a solid price. All right.
Courcelette, that's a much better deal than some of the other cuvées that are currently up. The Côte de Pie and the 3.4. Those are well over $100. So
well over $100. This one's coming in at 55. We've got 11 of them. I think this one's a solid deal. And I think anybody's going to be able to jump in and steal that one for $55. So let's travel. I'm going to drag you kicking and screaming around the rest of France. We've got an 09 Boucassel Châteauneuf du Pape. This one, we've got two of them for $85. I think this is a phenomenal price for an 09 Boucassel.
Yeah,
it's got 14 years of age. I'll bet it's right in its drinking window right now.
Yeah, there's the 2000 in also for 95. So 10 more bucks. You got, an additional 9 years. I think I did the math right on that one, right? Yep. 85 to 95, 2000 to 2009. Okay, just wanted to check with you. Yeah, but both great vintages. 09 probably a little bit riper, more forward, but I think both of those would be great picks. I also flagged just below, if we're doing alpha in the Rhone, I flagged the 15 Chateau Ladner Cuvée de Cadet at 80. That's kind of their, upper tier from the standard Chateauneuf, and it's not terribly expensive, I think, for the quality, and obviously there's some big scores if you mind, but that was another one at $80 I thought was decent. Oh, and right next to that, if you'll permit me, our perennial favorite, Emmanuel Reynaud's Chateau Reyas.
Yes.
97, case of 97 La Pielade. This is, let's just say back in the late 90s, this was not expensive. These days, that's different. 205 reserve on those. So
we know while we're in the Rhone, Pierre Eusebio Châteauneuf du Pape, not for you. Original wood case. This one's 2016, $350 a bottle, but this one's a very highly regarded bottle, and you're getting it OWC. We've got
that's a lot. That's a lot.
That's a lot. That's a lot. And it's not.
I mean, that's not for you. What's the deal with that? Did you look this up? Like, I don't know.
I did not look it up. I didn't really have time today. We're in a bit of a time crunch, but I thought this one was fantastic. I mean, I thought it was fantastic to mention. I'm really curious about it because at that price point for that producer with a name like Not For You,
that's so strange.
Classic sales technique.
It's lists the name too again on the label, and it says this is a rare limited cuvee uniquely made during great vintages, and also it's made from old Grenache. So it's funny that there's got to be some kind of inside joke that we're missing. I'm sure
there's something going on there.
That's cool. I've never seen that before.
Very cool. While we're still in the Rhone, we've got a 91 Chapoutier Hermitage Cuvée de l'Oreille Blanc. This one's a 3-liter bottle in the original wooden case for $4.80.
Yeah.
So the tasting notes are actually solid for this. And this is 3 liters OWC. Yep. This is the first time we've seen this in auction at,
really?
3 liters. Yeah, I get the sense you probably just don't see large formats of this very much, especially not at that size. We've got a 1998 Page de Boulet Année Hermitage La Chapelle.
Oh, your favorite, La Chapelle. Yeah, I saw this in 97 and 98.
150 solid.
Interesting
price.
that the 97 is the same price as the 98. That kind of doesn't make sense to me because 98's definitely a better vintage.
It didn't make sense to me either. And that's why I mentioned the 98, because this comes in with really good recent tasting notes. I think 150 is a solid price for this. And then there's the Chateau Saint-Cosme Côte Rôtie.
Saint-Côme. It's actually Saint-Côme. Saint-Côme. I was correct.
That's exactly what I just said. That's what I said. The Saint-Côme, you pronounced it a little bit.
Yeah. Anyway.
But that one, $90, right?
$90, yeah.
Look, maybe it's over the hill, but it's 24 years of age.
Yeah, I don't think so. These wines are serious. They rose to prominence in the 90s, and there's a lot of different labels there, but the 99 Côte Rôtie, I'm not surprised. It got a big score too, so that probably pushed it up. But
I'll bet you Sterling, one of our head of sales here, is probably really upset with me for mentioning this because I know he loves Côte Rôtie. I'll bet you he's eyeing that bottle. Yeah, maybe not.
Because he hates it when we talk about the producers.
He hates it when we talk about his Côte Rôtie.
Actually, to follow it in that, I will mention the Alain Graillot wines that are in this week. It's one of my favorite producers. Unfortunately, the proprietor and winemaker passed away last year, I believe. But there's 06 Gros Hermitage at 50. There's one, looks like one's got a bid. One's at 51, 2 bottles, I should say. And then there is a mag of 17 at 90, which I think is great because large formats, again, not super easy to find. And that's some great wine there. So
let's travel Champagne here for a second. We've got this Cristal.
A big brand label. You're so into these big brands with Champagne.
The only reason I'm mentioning this is because it's a mag.
Are you getting paid about LVMH or something?
Exactly. Or? LVMH is paying me. It's a mag of 08. And it already has a bid on it. 08's an epic year. And I feel like we don't see a ton of Cristal mags come through. Maybe I'm crazy there. But I thought
that's true. Magnums of that, not often. And they're generally never good deals. You know what I mean? Like Champagne, it's funny. It's like Champagne, one of those things that at auction always seems to be overpriced. Like,
yes.
And we talked about Krug last week. There was some Clos Lambinet and some other craziness, and the prices are just astronomical. But in this case, I don't think that's insane. I don't think 770 is nutty price.
No.
You can see this litany of scores that it got too. So, yeah. Also, did you see there's Cedric Bouchard, which I love talking about?
Yes, you do.
Not great deals, not great values, but still great wines. And there's 15, 16, there's 2012 Côte de Bechelin, all over 250, I believe. So nothing tremendously cheap there, but great wines. Also 2012 Elie Ure in this week, which caught my eye, and a Jacquesson 09, the Vosel Town, which is a label I'm not familiar with, but 220, it looks pretty serious.
Well, also there's a 2012 Paul Roger Blanc de Blancs.
Oh, cool.
Already has action on it. Yeah, great reviews, and we're seeing action. It started at 80.
Oh, yeah, you're right. 2 bottles. They both have bids, huh?
They both have bids. I thought that one was really interesting. And then before we wrap up here, I want to talk a little bit about, I saw some nice Alsatian wine.
Really?
Yeah, there's some really interesting Alsatian. There's a 97 Zin Umbrecht Pinot Gris. There's actually a bunch of Zin Umbrecht that came into auction this week. $70 for a 97 Zin Umbrecht Pinot Gris. And there's some Gewürztraminer as well.
Interesting. It's been filtering in last few weeks, and then all of a sudden there's like quite a bit of it. It's all over the place in vintages and vineyards too, like 14 Clos Riesling. That would be killer, man. That Clos is awesome. 14
Trimbach, Riesling, Schlossberg. There's some really, really interesting Alsatian stuff coming to auction this week that personally I have my eye on because I love Alsatian wine. I'm a huge...
Yeah.
I don't know. What do we call people who love Alsatian wines? Alsace heads? Alsacistas? I don't know.
Alsacistes.
Alsacistas. I don't know if I'm coining something here or
just upsetting people.
or just upsetting. I'm probably upsetting a lot of people.
Hey, wait, we have 1 minute. What are you drinking? We never said that at the beginning.
I am drinking a Paul Jabolet Domaine de Talibert.
Oh, the Talibert. Oh, cool. Right on.
I love Gros Hermitage. You know what? Shoot me a link. I'm going to go bid on that Graillot. And there's
get that mag at 17. Stuff. Get that mag. I have this bottle of William Sellium Port. I haven't opened it yet because I have to hit the road, but I'm going to have it when I get home. So.
All right. Well, look. This has been our mini French edition of Finally Hammered. We went through all of the French regions today.
Not all of them, but
a lot of French regions. We went through a lot of interesting French stuff today. No, you're right.
We didn't talk about.
But there wasn't a lot of the Loire stuff.
Southwest. We didn't talk about Haut-Pyrénées. We didn't talk about Jura.
We talked about enough. Okay, we did enough, Paul. But what we're going to try and do this week, we're trying to cut it up and do some smaller formats of the show, of the podcast. We're going to come back. We're going to do a little bit of US wine. We'll do an auction recap. But ladies and gentlemen, this has been the French edition of Finally Hammered for the week of January 9th, 2023. We will see you all again later this week when we do some other regions. So
are there other regions? There must be, I guess.
Of the world.
I didn't know there were other places that had wine besides France. So.
There are other places in the world, Paul. There are other regions in the world. I know you only drink French wine because
not true. I just showed you. I got William Sellian Port right here. It's not from Portugal. Right. It's not from Portugal. I don't know if you knew that.
But, by the way, as a little teaser, there's a lot of really interesting wine from the US this week.
That's true.
Like some really fascinating stuff, and not just your typical steakhouse wine menu stuff that we're bringing in. We're bringing some really cool off the beaten path stuff from some vintages. Anyway, This is Jeff McGurn and Paul Walker for WineBid. Cheers. Happy drinking, everyone.
Cheers.